Hey there, welcome to another episode of Mike's Collection. I'm Mike, and this is Casey. And in this episode, we're going to talk about some new Transformers I've got from various waves. The first one I have to show you is from the newest line of Transformers from Hasbro, which is Earth Rise. Then I've got some reactions Transformer figures from Super 7. And then I have some more Hasbro Transformers from last year's series, which was called Siege. So, without any further ado, let's just jump right into them. So the first new figure I have to show you is Wheeljack from the Transformers Earth Rise series. Now, if you watched my prior Transformers video, I reviewed 4 of the other Earth Rise figures that I had picked up. Hoist, Grapple, Cliffjumper, and Ironworks. And I told you that there were a couple other figures in the first wave that I passed on because I was content enough with previous incarnations of those characters. So I wasn't interested in buying the Earth Rise, Starscream, Optimus Prime, or Astro Train. So the only figure from wave 1 that I didn't get that I wanted was Wheeljack, and now I found him. So here you see him in his packaging. And there's some nice artwork there on the side. And here on the back. This is the only chance I have to show you what his alt mode looks like. So there you see he transforms into a sports car, as he always has. And so now let's pop him open and take a look at Wheeljack. So here is Wheeljack outside of the packaging. And before I get into talking about this figure, I just want to clarify something I said a second ago. I sometimes forget that people are always watching my videos for the very first time. So you might be wondering why I said the only way I can show you his alt mode is on the back of the packaging. It's because I never transform my Transformers. I strictly collect them because I like the robots. I couldn't care less about the vehicles, really. So I never bother transforming them. So if you came here for a full in-depth review of these Transformers, you might be a little disappointed that I never discuss their alt modes. But so I'm just going to talk about the robot modes of these guys here. So here's Wheeljack. So this is the last figure I was looking for from the new Earthrise series. And like all of the Earthrise figures, I'm pretty impressed with him. But he's not one of my favorites. I still think Hoist and Grapple were excellent. And they were probably contenders for my best of list at the end of the year. Wheeljack I don't feel as strongly about. And maybe it's just because I don't feel as strongly about the character. But that's not necessarily true, because I do think Wheeljack is a great character, and I really like him. And I really like a great figure of Wheeljack. My problem with him is that he's always felt kind of short and squatty. And I don't think it makes him look like a very cool character. And this one still seems kind of squatty to me. I feel like his legs could be that much longer, or you could have an extra piece here to kind of stretch out his torso a little bit. He just looks kind of a little too condensed or compressed or something. So, and I'll put up a picture here of the original Wheeljack toy. And you'll see here, so the original Wheeljack that came out in 1984, so like Grapple and Hoist and them, he was one of the very original Transformers. I never had Wheeljack as a kid, which always kind of bummed me out because he was what I felt one of the main characters. He's like the Autobot scientist, so he was featured quite a bit in the cartoons and the comic books. So, he's an important character. And I never got my own Wheeljack until when I started collecting Transformers again as an adult in kind of the mid-2000s, when Hasbro launched their Classics line, which then became Generations line, and then became something else. Anyway, I think by the time they released a Wheeljack in 2011, the line was called Generations. So here is my 2011 Wheeljack. And this was a decent figure in that, he looks very much like the classic figure. He's got all the things you'd expect to see in a Wheeljack. He's got the obvious colors, the head sculpt is pretty great. It's pretty good, except, again, he looks so squatty. Look at how thick those legs are. And then just these little teeny parts here that connect his from his knee up to his torso, it's so small, and it just makes him look like fat, I guess, and just kind of diminishes his cool factor. So even though I thought this was a pretty decent figure and pretty true to the original toy, this is one of the characters that I thought, I am going to upgrade to the Earth Rise figure, because this was just a little too chubby looking and stuff for me. So whereas I've chosen not to upgrade my Astro Train and my Starscream because I'm content with my previous versions, Wheeljack's one of the guys that I felt I needed an update, even though I had a decent Generation 1 style figure already. And this figure just doesn't blow this one out of the water the way I hoped it would. He still suffers from being a little squatty. He's not as bad. Like you can see, he's at least a head taller than him, so that helps some. And also, his from his knees down, it's not quite as thick on this figure as it is on this figure, so that helps as well. But some of the other areas I feel like he's lacking is these kind of wing pieces that Wheeljack is kind of known for. I feel they could stand out a little bit better, maybe if they were brighter silver and a little larger. And also, even this version has the kind of twin little cannons on his shoulders. I feel this guy is really lacking those. He's even got little plugs there that it would have been so easy to include a couple little cannons to plug into those. So it seems like kind of a missed opportunity, especially at the $30 price point, to be missing those pieces there. So he's just, I don't know, he feels a little bland to me. But he does look good. I like this head sculpt a lot. Is it vastly superior to this one? Not really. This one here, you see the eyes are a little bit, the eyes are a little bit darker on this one, but that's because he has the light piping, which basically means, so on the back of his head, that's clear plastic. So if a light, depending on where the light source is hitting him, the light would shine through the back of the head and light up his eyes. So when that works, it looks really cool, but when he's sitting on a shelf like that, his eyes kind of get a little lost. So I like in this one, he's got the brighter blue eyes. So I think that's an improvement. But yeah, I don't really have a whole lot more to say about this Wheeljack. I think it's a good figure, but I still think they could make a better one. Whereas with, say, Grapple and Hoist, who I talked about in my last video, I think those are basically, for this price point, the best that it's going to get. I think they're near perfect. And for Wheeljack, though, considering that Earthrise is the middle part of a trilogy that Hasbro's doing, so the first bit was Siege, now Earthrise, whatever the third act ends up being, if they end up redoing Wheeljack, I might be compelled to get that figure. My phone started going off there, so I had to cut for a second. But before I move on from Wheeljack, well, first, I'll get rid of this guy, but first I just want to show you a little bit how that light piping works, like I mentioned. So you see how his eyes, they really stand out once you have a light source kind of behind him. So, yeah, that's the idea behind that. Okay, so let's get rid of this guy. And so a couple things about him. For accessories, he only has the one gun, and it's a pretty sad looking little thing. That's pretty pathetic. And I assume that's probably the style of gun that he's always had, because even this other figure had it, but his, it's much better. It's substantially bigger. I don't know why this guy has such a pathetic little gun. But I do see here it has a peg on it, the side, so it looks like you could plug this into his shoulder. So it would at least, because Wheeljack at least had one of those cannons on his shoulder in the cartoons and stuff. So there you go. You can at least place that there. But as far as articulation goes, I won't get into too much detail. But his hands swivel. He bends at the elbow. He's got a good ball jointed socket on his shoulders. Spins at the waist. His head turns and he can look up and down. Bends at the knee, bends at the ankle. So, he's very posable. That seems to be, that's the thing I love most about all these newer Transformers compared to their vintage counterparts, is just how posable they are. And yeah, so Wheeljack is no different in that regard. It's a good figure. And I don't know, maybe over time it'll grow on me a little bit more, or maybe I'll sour on it. I don't know. It's a decent figure. Now the next thing I have to show you are a couple of Transformers reaction figures. So you see here I've got Jazz and Bumblebee. So these are the last two figures from Wave 1 that I still needed. So when Wave 1 first came out, there was 6 figures. So besides these two, there was also Optimus Prime, Megatron, Soundwave, and Starscream. Now, I really like these simple little figures, but they're fairly expensive. To buy them directly from Super 7, they are $18.99 American, and even my local comic shop has these guys, but they're selling them for $25. Now, for a figure that barely moves and is so simple as far as its sculpting and its accessories, you see here they come with like one little pistol, and they only move, they have 5 points of articulation. Their legs move forward and backward, their arms, and their head turns. So they're very simple, and it's really hard to justify that price for these figures. So I wasn't sure if I was going to get every one. It just so happened I really like those 4 characters that I bought the first time, but I thought I would maybe pass on Jazz and Bumblebee, or at least wait till I could get them for a little bit cheaper if they went on sale. But Wave 2 is now up for pre-order, and it's shipping very soon. So I've ordered the entirety of Wave 2, and I've even pre-ordered Wave 3. So I guess it seems like I'm going to be all in on these figures. So I figured I might as well order the last 2 from Wave 1, just in case they become harder to find later. And my local shop here, Strange Adventures, did knock $5 off of the price of each of these, so I did get a bit of a deal. So, as you would have seen in the previous figures that I would have showed you, very simple figure here, and I'm actually going to pop these guys open so you get a better look at them. But the one of the nicest features of these figures is the original card art. These things are very 80s looking, even though 80s Transformers never actually came on blister cards like this because they were much larger and they came in boxes generally. So this is pretty cool. And so there you see the other figures in the series. So yeah, I got these 4, and now I got these 2. So I got the complete wave. And let's take a closer look at Bumblebee. So again, some really nice artwork. And I'm not sure if the same artist did all 6 cards or not, but when I'd posted the previous figures that I had on Instagram, I actually had somebody comment that he was pleased that I was sharing the figures, and he said he had done the artwork for these. So yeah, I'm forgetting his name right now. I'll have to go back on my Instagram and look, and maybe I'll share it here on the bottom, so maybe you can check him out and maybe follow his stuff, because yeah, I think this is fantastic. I love this artwork here. So yeah, let's take a look at these guys all opened up. So here are Jazz and Bumblebee outside of the packaging. And you see I've got their little guns are in their hands there. So there's Bumblebee with his little pistol, and Jazz with his. And the articulation is the same for both. So, their arms, they can do the full 360 around with the arms. The head's a little tight, but it turns. I imagine you could get that to do a full 360 as well. And then the legs have a decent range of motion there. You can kick them all the way forward. And it looks like they can probably go all the way back there too. So full split. So these are like, vintage Star Wars toys of the 80s. That's the whole idea behind Super 7's reaction line, is that they're just meant to be toys from a simpler time. And it works great with a lot of lines. Some people might not think it works great for Transformers because obviously they don't transform. But as somebody who only ever really cared about the robot modes anyway, this is kind of perfect for me. So yeah, these guys are both pretty great. Now, I had a hard time deciding if I was going to even open these figures up because, like I said, the packaging is so nice. And with a lot of the other reaction figures I've bought, I've just kept them in the packaging and I pinned them to the wall. Like I'll show you here. So you'll see there I've got like the Crow and the Boondock Saints and Star Trek and some Masters of the Universe. So those are all Super 7 reaction figures, and I just keep the figures right in the cards there to create a border around my wall. So I thought I would do that with these guys. However, after the first wave of 6 figures, they quickly announced that they were doing Wave 2 and Wave 3, and I was like, man, I'm going to end up with so many of these things, I might need a whole new wall just to pin these things up. So then I decided, well, maybe I'll open them up, and it'll be a lot easier to display them just on a shelf somewhere. They won't take up nearly as much space. However, I've been very careful when I open these things up. like with all of my GI Joes, I have a lot of them, as you can see behind you. What I do with them is I take an X-Acto knife and I peel the bubble off of the card very carefully so that the card is still in really nice shape and I still have the image without any damage to it. But with these ones here, what I opted to do is I just cut along the side and a little bit on the top and a little bit on the bottom. That way I was able to slide the little tray out there that holds the figure and take them out so I can play with them like this. But I'm going to keep all these packages just like this because I might decide to actually tuck the figure back inside there and just pin them to the wall. So I've kind of got the best of both worlds. Now, sure, they're no longer mint in package, but I don't buy these things to resell them. I don't really care about the value so much. I just want to display them in the best way possible. So it's nice now. I'm going to keep them out on a shelf like this for now, but I might eventually move to pinning them up on the wall. And yeah, I think these things are great. So they're available online at super7.com and also at like Big Bad Toy Store and other retailers like that. So now I've got a couple of Siege figures to show you. And you can see here they are in their boxes. These I just got these in today as I'm shooting this, just maybe a couple hours ago. And yeah, these figures, they don't have nice packaging like the Earth Rise figures or like the reaction figures. This is how they come. These plain brown boxes. And they're upside down here, but there you go. So you'll see I've got Cromar, Hotshot, and Red Wing. So these figures here, they're store exclusives. You wouldn't just find these, at any Walmart or whatever. Some of these I think were exclusive to online. Some of them were exclusive to certain stores. Like Red Wing, for example, I think was originally exclusive to Target. And perhaps in the States, that's where he is exclusive to. Because whenever I had tried to get one, I found him on eBay, and he's very expensive. People were selling them for like $70-$80 sometimes for this figure. And we don't have any Targets in my area. We don't have any in my province at all. So I thought if I wanted him, I was going to have to pay big prices on the secondary market. And I'm on a Transformers Facebook group, and somebody on the group posted, put up a post and said, these figures are currently available on toysrus.ca, the Canadian Toys R Us website. And they were all on there for regular retail price. So these guys here, the size of these figures, these are deluxe size. So they would normally be $29.99, but they were actually on sale. So I think they were like $17 or something like that. And then Red Wing here, he's a Voyager class. So he's like a $40 figures. And he was full price. So I paid $40 for him, but that's much better than the 70 or 80 people were asking for on the secondary market. So I have opened these guys all up, but basically what you get in here is pop it open, and it is just like that. Like you see the figure. There's no fancy artwork. The instructions are tucked in the back there, and that's all there is to it. So there's really no character, like unique artwork or anything to show you. All these boxes are the same. So down here you see Hotshot. And lastly, here's a quick look at Red Wing in the box. But now let's pop these guys open and take a look at them loose. So let's first take a look at Cromar here. Now, Cromar is the leader of the Transformers sub-team called Power Dashers. And the original Power Dasher figures were all released in 1984. So these guys were, with Transformers from the very beginning. The first year Transformer toys rolled out, these guys, the Power Dashers, were part of the line. However, I had no idea these things even existed. If I did, I've long since forgotten about it. There's probably a lot of people that don't know these things existed because these characters were never featured in the comic books or the cartoons, and they were only available through a mail order thing. And the characters didn't even have names at the time. From what I understand, there was like sometimes little ads packaged inside the toys. And for where all my toys were purchased in Canada, maybe we never even got the little advertisement even, because I don't remember seeing one. But if you bought certain toys in the States, there would have been a little ad tucked inside that said, for whatever, a couple of bucks or a couple of, proofs of purchase, you can order a Power Dasher. And then they would send you one of 3 nameless figures, and you didn't even know which one you were going to get. You couldn't select it. But Hasbro has since given these characters names. And yeah, so this is Cromar. And the other two figures they also released last year. So this is Zetar, and this is Aragon. So these guys are all new representations of the 3 Power Dashers. So I didn't know of any of these characters before, and all 3 of these figures are just repaints of prior figures that we got in the line, but they all have new heads, which is, I think, all you really need. You know, reuse of parts is pretty common in the toy industry, but as long as they have a unique head sculpt so that character feels, you know, like an individual, that's all I really need. And yes, these guys all have unique heads, and I think they're all pretty great heads. They actually kind of look like Transformer knockoffs to me. Like when I was a kid, you could find all kinds of transforming robots in the dollar store and stuff, and these guys just have such kind of weird looks. But this guy kind of reminds me of Voltron in the face. He also kind of looks like he almost has like clown makeup on. Like he just looks kind of silly, but I'm into it. I like it. I felt the same way about Aragon, who I just recently got for my birthday in January. He's kind of strange looking too. But yeah, I think these guys are a really neat addition to my collection. And you know, even though they're not new characters, they might as well be. They're long forgotten figures, and you know, this is the first time they've been given names. And yeah, it's just nice not to just be rehashing the same characters over and over and over again. As nice as it is to get new versions of characters like Wheeljack and Grapple and stuff, things that I grew up with as a kid, I think in order to keep the line fresh, you got to add some new characters now and again. And yeah, that's what these guys are to me. I think they're pretty great. So let me just get these guys out of here. And so with Cromar here, the figure that he's a repaint of is Six Gun. So this was a character that was released in, I think, the first or second wave of Siege figures in 2019. So you see the whole body is the exact same. The only difference is the head sculpt and the paint job. And yeah, both these guys look pretty cool. But I think they, when you stand them next to each other, you know, they both can be unique characters. So I don't mind spending the money to get a second one of him. Now, as far as articulation goes, he's pretty good. The shoulders, it's not a ball jointed shoulder. It's this thing that kind of goes up and down. It's kind of ratchet, and it does spin around. But you see, these guys are meant to be broken apart, and you can use the other pieces to enhance your other toys. So yeah, I think they called them weaponizers. So like you could snap this part off and attach it to the side of, you know, Ultra Magnus or something. So he snaps apart quite easily. So it does maybe hinder his articulation some. But you see he still moves there at the ankles and at the knee. And so he's still pretty well articulated. Head spins around. And yeah, I think there's probably lots of room to customize this guy. Like he's got little plugs on his arms and little sockets and stuff. So you could kind of move this guy around like these things here. Take those off, plug them in here, or plug them in the sides. Like, I don't know. There's lots of little customizable options with these guys. Now, I kind of just like him the way he came, and that's probably how I'll keep him on my shelf. But yeah, overall, I don't have a whole lot to say about this guy because I have no history, no nostalgia as far as Cromar goes. But yeah, he's a nice addition to the collection. So next up, let's take a look at Hotshot. Now, this is another character I have no connection with whatsoever. And for all intents and purposes, he's a brand new character. So he is a complete repaint of the Hound figure that we got in the first wave of Siege figures. The only change is the new head here. But the head is substantially different from Hound's, and the paint job is substantially different from Hound. So it really stands out as a different character. You would never look at this guy and think, oh, that's just Hound. Here, I'll even bring Hound out here for a second so we can compare the two. So you can see Hound looks like his Generation 1 counterpart of the 80s. He's, a military Jeep, so he's painted in that like military green, and his head sculpt, it's matches what he was supposed to look like in the vintage toy line and cartoons and whatnot. Whereas Hotshot, head's totally different. He's kind of got this crown looking thing kind of sculpted on the front. Otherwise, it's the same figure from the neck down, but you can see how different the paint jobs are. So they really look quite different. Now, what I know, just basically reading the Wikipedia pages on this guy, is Hotshot was originally introduced in the Armada line of Transformers, which that happened when I wasn't collecting Transformers. It was more kind of anime inspired and geared towards kids. I'm not even sure when exactly that show came out, but probably the early 2000s. And then Armada, it eventually transitioned into I don't know, what was it? Cybertron. There were multiple lines that were all connected in this kind of anime universe. And yeah, so when he started out in Armada, he was kind of a yellow and kind of small, round little guy. He looked kind of like he was supposed to be like a kid of the group. But by the time he got to Cybertron, he took on blue paint job, and it looked like maybe he was growing up a little bit. So they've taken that blue look and now turned it into a G1 character. But yeah, as far as I know, the introduction of this toy to the toy line is the first time we've had the character of Hotshot appear in the G1 universe. So yeah, like I said, he's essentially a new character, because for me, who's a strict G1 collector, I had no interest in the character when he was featured in Armada and Cybertron and whatnot. But now that he's worked his way into the Siege and Earth Rise storyline, I'm into him. So yeah, like any Siege Earthrise figure, he's got good articulation. Elbows, shoulders, knees, waist, some articulation at the feet. For accessories, he's got the exact same stuff as Hound. So he's got this kind of rifle here with this removable ammo case, and this here looks like what would have been could have been a firing missile launcher. I think it was on the vintage toy. But with Hound, I've got it on his shoulder because he always had that cannon on his shoulder. And you could do the same thing here. He's got the little plugs on there. But just to differentiate them a little bit, I just decided to plug it in onto his shoulder. But you could plug it in anywhere. You could plug it in on his wrist, plug it in on his leg. There's lots of kind of options with these figures. So yeah, I think Hotshot is a bright, colorful, fun figure. I thought Hound was a great figure when I got him. A really nice update to the vintage figure. So yeah, I'm pretty happy to get it repainted and give us this brand new character. So last up, let's take a look at Red Wing. So this guy is a Decepticon Seeker, which is the name of the sub-team made up of all the jets. And it's a little hard to see his eyes here because he has that same light piping technology of my old Wheeljack. So let me just, if I shine the light behind him there, you see how his eyes kind of light up. So, Red Wing here is kind of an interesting character in that he's kind of created by mistake, from what I understand. The Seekers, there's been kind of 6 core Seekers from the Generation 1 toy line. The primary one being Starscream, of course. And this mold was originally released as Starscream as part of the Siege line. So, since Siege was based on the Transformers war on Cybertron before it came to Earth, Starscream doesn't transform into the Earth jet that he's best known for. Instead, he transforms into this kind of weird triangular, what they call Tetra jet, which is kind of this is the shape of it. It's just this weird triangle thing. And so that's what this mold transforms into. But you can barely tell when you look at his robot mode. It looks pretty much like his famous Earth mode. And yeah, I think he looks great. And this is why I didn't bother to buy the Earthrise Starscream, because I was content enough with this one. Now, maybe if you were a jet fanatic and you really didn't like the fact that he turns into a spaceship instead of a jet, you might be compelled to get the new Earthrise one. But since I don't transform them, I'm pretty happy with this. So yeah, there was 3 jets in the vintage line that looked just like Starscream. And then there was 3 more that they called the Coneheads, who were still essentially the same, except the nose cone of the jet kind of popped up on the top of their head there. So, unfortunately, we didn't get any of the Coneheads in the Siege line, but they did repaint this Starscream figure a couple of times to give us a couple other figures. The first one here being Thundercracker. So, at first glance, it looks like Thundercracker might be a straight repaint of Starscream, but the one change they did is they gave him a new head. So, Starscream, I don't know if you can see the detail there, but he's got kind of just this little scowl on his mouth. Not much emotion at all in that face. And Thundercracker is the same figure, except for the head, because this figure he's got a little smirk. You can see his smile kind of going up to one side there. And it just gave Thundercracker a little bit more personality, which I liked. So with Redwing here, he's actually a repaint of Thundercracker rather than Starscream, because he too has the little smirk on his face. So yeah, as I was saying about him being kind of a mistake character, in the vintage cartoon, even though there was already 6 Seekers to choose from, sometimes the animators, when they were trying to fill the screen with extra Decepticons, they would just take the character model of Starscream and the other Seekers and just paint them in different colors. So there was like yellow and blue and green and orange. And all those characters have since been given unique names and personalities when before they were legitimately just meant to be like kind of background filler. So now we have Acid Storm and Sunstorm, and I can't even remember the names of all of them right now. But apparently what was supposed to happen is originally there was going to be a figure release of the orange guy, Sunstorm, and there was some miscoloring done, and he ended up looking red in some comic book artwork or something somewhere. And then that red Transformer, people wanted to know who he was, and eventually Hasbro was kind of forced to give him a name, even though they didn't really intend for him to be another character at the time. And yeah, so now we got Redwing, and this is the first figure of him ever. And yeah, you'd think I wouldn't be excited about it because I already have this exact figure 5 times already, but I think this one's kind of great, and I love getting brand new characters to add to my Transformers like mythology. And yeah, I think this mold looks really good. My biggest gripe with it was, if you saw my review of Starscream and even Thundercracker, and the other 3 figures actually too, is they all just suffered from lack of paint apps. Like I think the gray on Starscream looks kind of unfinished. All this bit on the wings here, like I feel I could use some paint detail. He just ends up looking kind of plain and like an unfinished model kit. But I feel that affects Redwing less than the other ones. It's like the fact that he's got this red, white, with then this muddied up, black crud all over him too. I think it looks really good. I think he's the nicest looking of all the figures that use this mold. So yeah, I think Redwing is pretty great.
So out of these 3 new Transformers, I think I would say that Redwing is probably my favorite. Now let's see if anybody else has a different opinion. Buster, if you had to choose out of these 3 Transformers, which one would you pick as your favorite? Which one, Buster? Oh, you like Hotshot? It wasn't a ringing endorsement, but I think Buster has selected Hotshot as his favorite new Transformer. So Casey, which one of these Transformers would you say is your favorite? So come over here and show me. Case, who do you like best? Casey, please don't lick the countertops. Casey, which Transformer do you like best? Casey? Having a hard time deciding here. Casey, pick one. Who do you like? Who do you like, Casey? And as you can see, Casey likes them all the same.
So those are my new Transformer figures. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please make sure to like the video, maybe subscribe to the channel. And as always, I appreciate any questions or comments that you might have. So please leave those below. And yeah, until next time, make sure you stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands, all that shit. So yeah, I'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.